before I start into anything. For those of you who don't know me, in fact, let me do it the way I was taught. Mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa. I'm an Irish guy. And that has one particular implication. That means that I will never say in one word what you can say with 25. Okay? And so when the guys said, we want you to come and give the folks an overview of the workshop that we've built behind the Leadership Charisma book, and we want you to walk through it, when they told me, you're going to do that 45-minute workshop in 25 minutes, I just had a freak attack, okay? But this morning when I saw Sharon, I said, it's going to be cool. It's going to be okay, because all I have to do is just ramp it up to about that level. So let me, in a week, when forecasts and weather forecasts have been so important, let me make a forecast for my presentation. I reckon I'll be talking somewhere around 250 words a minute, but there will be gusts of up to 1,000 words a minute on very frequent occasions. You may become inundated if you're not careful. We're going to move quickly through this. Second thing I have to say, and thank you so much, Carrie, is that you can probably hear the frog in the back of my throat. I blame Waco. Waco is the only place in the world where if you don't suffer allergies, you can be changed. You go there, we spent a week there last week, and every part of me is leaking or croaking or broken or something after a week. I don't know how they do it. It's extraordinary. But here's the good thing. Here's the really good thing about this. Marie has heard me ad nauseum rehearse this talk over the last week and before that, and even in the hotel here 2-3 times a day. If I dry up, she's going to come up and take over. She wasn't aware of that, but I know because I heard her last night. I was lying awake worrying about this, and she was lying asleep actually giving the presentation and going through it step by step. So she's a saint, she truly is. We've built behind the Leadership Charisma Assessment, ready to go, behind the Leadership Charisma Assessment, an absolutely first-class briefing package for you. Fully scripted, wonderful package that takes all of the information that we've built into the book and telescopes it down into a 45-minute briefing that is pointed directly, like a laser, at selling checkpoints, at positioning checkpoints to do exactly what Jesse was talking about his people needing to do this morning. Remember what he said? He said, we had, when we went into 2010, he said we had ambiguity, uncertainty, people were shell-shocked. And then on the end of that slide, he said, and we were aiming for 50% growth. Well, you know what? Every single one of our clients is in that situation. The only thing that's on their minds right now is, how do I get results? Nothing else matters. It's all bottom line. And when we started to suspect that things might be going a little bit pear-shaped at the end of 2008, all of our organizations, all of the sensible ones, started to pare back costs. So they started to try and trim out any costs that were unnecessary. They tried to get a little bit more efficient. And sadly, in a lot of situations, as Jesse and Sharon mentioned, they lost team members. In some cases, they lost team members that were highly valued, people they really didn't want to lose. And then they said, we need to get 50% growth. You got a shell-shocked team, greatly reduced resources, and that, for the people who will sit in front of you, for the leaders who will sit in front of you for this workshop, is their reality. That's where they live. 2008, they trimmed costs. 2009, they trimmed costs. Many large US and global corporations didn't hurt too badly on the bottom line because they were savage on the costs. 2010, they got away with it to a certain extent. Well, guess what? We're as skinny as we can get right now. There is nothing more to cut. We all look like Angelina Jolie or we've just trimmed as much fat as you possibly can off yourself. And the only way that we can get that additional productivity and that 50% growth in our organizations is from the teams that are now left post this obliteration, post this tough 2-3 years period. So we're working with this, again, using Jesse's words, this team who have been through a great period of uncertainty, a great period of change, a great period of ambiguity, and we're saying to them, hey, we need you to up your game right now, dramatically. Here's the reality. The extent to which Our organizations, our clients' organizations, will be successful in raising and getting those additional positive results is 100% dependent on the extent to which those surviving team members are engaged with their jobs. You know, if they're not, it's all over, because we have nowhere else to get it. It's just a simple reality. Now, for you people, for me, for the people who you'll be talking to, one of the really nice things is we don't have to educate them about engagement. Everyone knows what it is. It's that certain relationship that a person has with their job and their organization where they will give that extra 10, 20, 30% of themselves. They'll give that extra effort that if they hadn't given it, you wouldn't notice. So they go that extra mile. They really buy into what you're trying to achieve. And we all know as well from the stats that engagement works. High engagement organizations get extraordinary results, extraordinarily better results than the low engagement organization. I mean, it's just, there are so many stats out there. It works. Here's one of the biggest studies. It's the only one we quote in it because every executive you stand in front knows, I must engage my people. They are the source of my success in 2011 and beyond. They're the source of my survival first and then my thriving in 2011 and beyond. And look at the gaps there. These are not, oh, you can do an extra 3 or 4% if you get your people engaged. The gaps are enormous. As a result, every organization that you drop into now, who's any way serious, is doing something about engagement. But you know, there is so much talk of engagement in the sense of the micro details of the deal that one has with one's employees, the environment they work in, and the minutiae, that sometimes we lose sight of the fact that engagement comes down to two critical things. One, you guys and I live, eat, breathe it. Job fit. Because you know, nobody is going to be consistently, energetically, enthusiastically engaged unless they're in a job that they fit. It just can't happen. Even on their best day, they're faking. You want engagement, you've got to have job fit. But the second thing, and let's say that that's given. Let's say that we've fitted people, we've used the PXD, and we put them into the right jobs, and we say, yeah, I know I got the right people in jobs that really turn them on. And you give them no leadership. Or worse, you give them leadership that turns them off. You put them working with an animal who just destroys them and takes all of that benefit of having them fitted into the job and basically just turns that switch. And in those situations, sometimes those folks who are fitted to their jobs are so disappointed and so turned off by their leadership that they actually become worse even than the people who are not fitted. They are more easily positively disengaged. Fortune magazine had a great quotation which I think summarizes what is the forgotten truth about engagement and productivity. 2011, 2012, 2013, until we start to emerge from where we are right now, the responsibility for those results, for engaging people, rests squarely and solely on the shoulders of the leaders who will come to this seminar. They are the decisive factor. They put it beautifully. They said, when you look at engaging environments, workplaces, it comes down to three relationships. The relationship, Carrie, I just realized there's a monitor here. And it's this big. And I keep looking over my shoulder to see is my slide working. You should see this thing. It's a relationship between the employees and management, the relationship between employees and their jobs and their company. That's the leader's responsibility. And the relationship between employees and other employees. And let's face it, the leader creating the environment in which we work is the person who sets up that relationship too. And that's what's forgotten in all the talk about engagement. That's what's forgotten. The leader is decisive. The leader makes the critical difference. And you may say, so what? Well, throughout history, there have always been leaders in a political and a business sense who for some reason could get quite extraordinary, almost superhuman results from people. Now, I'm an Irish Catholic, so when you ask me about US leaders who get that sort of extraordinary result, I immediately think John F. Kennedy. That's just us. In my house growing up, in every Irish house growing up, there were 2 pictures over the mantelpiece. The Sacred Heart of Jesus and John F. Kennedy. And they were on the same level. Every single mantelpiece. Am I joking, Marie? Every single home. There were these people who achieved these extraordinary results. And because, like the Greeks who walked the earth 2,000 years before Jesus Christ did, because they couldn't figure out what these people had that made them so capable of getting such extraordinary results out of people, they gave them a name. They called them charismatics. Said, oh, he has charisma. You know, charisma is like a big bucket that they use when they can't figure out why a person is able to get extraordinary results. I'll give you a fairly gross example. If you go to your doctor and you've got problems with your guts, and they try everything and they can't figure it out, they call it irritable bowel syndrome. That's the charisma of the medical world. I don't know what it is, so it's IBS. Charisma, I don't know, is it because he's a great speaker? Yeah, but not really that. Is it because he listens? Yeah, but not just that. And so the Greeks coined that word. You know what it means literally? God-given gift. It means literally God-given gift. And so when we talk about charismatics today and we talk about charisma, we're talking about people having a God-given gift. And when you look at the people you consider to be genuinely charismatic, hell, they really do appear to have something like that. In the business world, it's no different. There are lots of them all around us. Growing up all the time, you recognize Steve Jobs, you recognize Welsh, you may recognize Bezos, Branson from Virgin, and I always get the pronunciation of this wrong, Pierre Omidyar, who created eBay. People who were able to take a team of people and just light them up and zoom them to extraordinary productivity. And we call them charismatic leaders. And you know why we call them charismatic leaders? Because it absolves us of any responsibility for trying to be as good as them, because charisma is a God-given gift. And if you didn't get it, well, you shouldn't really be aspiring to it, because if the big guy decided you weren't getting it, well, that's just the way it is. We started trying, we weren't convinced. Jim certainly wasn't convinced on day one. And Bud did a stand-up. I mean, he knocked it out of the park with Bud on the day. And he wasn't immediately convinced that what we had, the opinion we had formed, that charisma was a function of behavior, he wasn't convinced that was the case. And I'm talking to him in the boardroom. We say, well, imagine the most charismatic person in the room is standing in the corner of the room with their head down and maybe a bag over their head and they're not moving. He said, now everybody comes into the room. How charismatic an impact will they have on them? He said, well, nothing. He said, when does he start having charismatic impact? He said, when he turns and smiles at them, or he looks at them, or he touches. Oh, when he does something. So it's down to the way he behaves. And that was where we started from. We said, hell, it has to be the way you behave. We got everything. In the book, you'll see, I think it's about 20 leaders from about 35 or 40 that we studied who were considered to be charismatic business leaders. We read everything that they had been written about them, their articles. It became very, very painful. But we had a fantastic road to Damascus moment. We had an epiphany where we noticed all of the language spoke about these people. And if it didn't use the word engagement, it did talk about the connection that they managed to create between the organization and their vision and so on and so forth. And so engagement was a running theme. And one day, working through it, we had this, as I say, epiphany, where we said, hey, shoot, look, everywhere they talk about engagement, they talk about charisma. And we look at the definitions. And when we saw the definitions side by side, it was like, boom, the lights went on and we said, they're actually the same thing, it's just perspective. Because charisma is not something that you have as a quality or an attribute. It's something that other people confer upon you because they like what you do. They like how you behave. They like the way you interact with them. So you get given charisma by somebody else. That's why you get people who in one context, say, fantastically charismatic speaker. Everybody is hanging on her every word. She goes down off the stage, starts shaking hands, and because the interpersonal skills are not as good as the presentational skills, people wonder, is this the same person? It's very situational. It's all about what the people whom you're charismatically impacting want to see in your behavior. So it's entirely behavioral. Once we realized that, we said, we're on to something. We started working with Doc. He said, charisma is too broad a definition, because charisma, the God-given gift, the charisma that Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt has, is different to what we associate with charismatic Christians, is different to what you associate with, hey, go into Google, go onto images, and put in charisma. You get about 75,000 hits of a nice-looking lady in a bikini. She used to be in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, apparently, Charisma Carpenter. So there are many definitions of charisma. Many, many definitions. We said, oh, shoot, well, we definitely don't want to be developing that in our leaders. So we defined a brand new kind of what we call a more commercial charisma. We said, what if we create a construct which is a combination of the traditional definition of charisma with the definition of engagement, and then figure out what behaviors will drive it, and then figure out how do we measure it, because if we can measure it, we can develop it. If it's behavioral, we can help anybody to develop those behaviors if they commit to it. During 2010, those of you who were on the Checkpoint 360 will have noticed that there was an additional item on the front end where we said, here's our definition of leadership charisma, and everybody who assessed a leader during 2010 was asked to rate that leader on a scale that ran from 5 down to 1. 5, he can walk on water. 1, he's charismatically bypassed in a really serious way, okay? And all we had to do from that point is take the input of those almost 400,000 direct reports, their feedback on 40,000 manager leaders, and figure out what are the behaviors that the highly charismatic people shared in common. What are the drivers? There were 26 of them. 26 specific behaviors. And you know, the day Doc brought them in, we looked at them, there were no surprises. It was so intuitive. You looked at it, you said, much to Doc's disappointment, I don't think we needed to talk to 40,000 people to figure this out. Because you look at them and you say, yeah, of course it is. It's obvious. But here's the great thing. It comes down to behavior. And if it's down to behavior, it means if you care to commit to assimilating the behaviors that charismatic leaders assimilate, you can become, by our definition, a charismatic leader who is a more engaging leader who, by definition, gets better results. That's a pretty good aspiration for a leader in this current marketplace. When we were kids, as we'd say in Ireland, fado, which means a long time ago, at Christmas, there were a couple of perennial presents. You always got a comic book. You know, it was kind of an annual, we called them. And somehow there was always a kaleidoscope in there as well. Now, the kids these days probably get an MS Windows 7.0 kaleidoscope application. I don't know, but we got this cardboard tube that came from Hong Kong, and it had a load of mirrors in the back end of it at all sorts of funny angles. And it had a load of little colored beads. And you looked through it, and when you turned it, you got these fantastic, I think they're called fractal patterns, but you got these wonderful patterns just like this. Now, here's the critical thing. All those beads in there, hundreds, thousands of them, you turn it even fractionally, and one bead slides and it moves a little bit. And the picture changed to something that probably has never been seen down that tube before. And will never be seen again. It changes dramatically. One bead. Charisma is just like that. Everybody has some of the beads in their behavior. You go through this and you realize every leader, by dint of the fact that they found themselves in that leadership position, are already adept at some of those behaviors. But if they can polish up 1 or 2 or 3 more, like the kaleidoscope, they can change the pattern out of sight. It is not a game of having to turn yourself inside out. It's a game of small changes in behavior that make a dramatic difference. And when you read the book, you'll see it is small things, and there are lots of them. Do you have to assimilate everything in every page? Absolutely not. You can change things overnight by changing small things. Now, we looked at the 26 behaviors that were driving charismatic impact on people, and we found that we could describe why they had a charismatic impact using 2 key principles that we talk about in the book. Every single English-speaking audience in the world knows what WIFM stands for. What's in it for me? And you're going to think I'm cynical, but let me say it anyway. When it comes down to it, most of what we do, most of the things that we do day to day are done in our own self-interest. We do it because there's something in it for us. Now, strip away all the niceties, all the altruism, all of the societal norms and so on and so forth. We act in our own self-interest. What we found was the charismatic leaders understand this, whether it's intuitively or because they read a book. Well, couldn't it be because they read a book? Because nobody's ever said this before. We're first. So they either intuitively do that, and they said the only way to get Hisham to want to enthusiastically engage with what I want him to do for me is to know what he wants to get out of that. To know him well enough so that anything I ask him to do, he's able to identify, because of the way I work with him, what's in it for him. Let me ask you to think of Jim Serbasco when you look at this. This is one of the best sentences, honestly, I think, in the book. It said, the extent to which you are perceived as being charismatic is directly proportional to the extent to which people feel or fare better after each interaction with you. Now, feel or do better after each interaction. Think of Jim Serbasco. You never went away from that man feeling more depressed. When you went up to him, you walked away, either your esteem was up here, your enthusiasm was up here, you were motivated, you were more positive, or you just knew something better that was going to help your business. Charismatic leaders make a decision that when people interact with them, it will make a positive difference to them. And when you see some of the behaviors we talk about, you'll see this describes it. If you go out of here and you forget everything else I said, remember WIFM and remember the charismatic equation. And if that informs everything that you do in the way you interact with your people, you won't go wrong, even if you don't read the rest of the book. And by the way, I spoke to somebody last night and they said, I don't read books. I don't really like reading. I just don't care for it. But I loved your book. And he, on the money, he said, because you can actually see what pieces you really need to read in that book. You don't actually have to read it all, you just have to read the colored boxes. Absolutely right. These two are in colored boxes. Absolutely right. This is a dyed-in-the-wool bathroom book. It's made for it. It really is. Now, in the workshop version that you're going to get, there are not many more slides, but there are more slides. It's more coherent, it goes longer. And it finally comes down to a point that says, hey, here are 6 of the key behavior groups that we address in the book, where we've pulled together the behaviors from the Checkpoint study on charisma, and we've given in the book a step-by-step approach on how you develop your charismatic impact by assimilating these behaviors. Now, I'm a simple person. I like step-by-step. I like to do. I don't like theoretical. I love the Harvard Business Review, but I always miss the box at the end, which is never there, that says, now do this. That entire book is now do this. Okay. There's much more in the briefing. All of the slides are fully scripted out. But let me give you a few examples, a quick flavor. One of the most critical things we found from this study, and that has been echoed by other studies, is you will go further and faster as a leader with good communication skills than with any other single set of behaviors. If you have nothing to say and nothing inside your head, but you can communicate that nothing really well, you have about 40% of what it takes to be charismatic. 40% of the impact, charismatic impact, came down to communication. And not just this sort of show-off communication, the interpersonal, I really want to hear from you, and as we would say in a Checkpoint sense, listening carefully without interrupting and soliciting feedback and suggestions and making it comfortable to raise concerns and so on. So communication was really decisive. The other thing, and Jim Serbasco knew this so well, and every single leader who gets results through motivating people knows this, that plaque or that framed statement of the vision that hangs in the hall of your organization means nothing to anybody except the 4 or 5 people who created it in a strategic meeting. It's important to have it because it says, here's why we exist. But it's not important to the people in Regis who have just come through, say, the last 2 or 3 years. They've lost some of their colleagues, complete reorganization, uncertain environment. What's important to them is, what does the vision mean for me? So, charismatic leaders reinterpret the vision so that it fits the people they're trying to motivate and engage. They know them well enough to be able to do that. Come to Ireland if you're too positive at the moment. If you're overflowing with optimism and you can't figure out how to bring yourself down a little bit, come over and we'll lend you some newspapers. Here's the reality. In every one of our countries, there is more than enough negativity to go around, and you can tap into it anytime you want very, very easily. You don't need it from the person who's leading you. Neither do you need Pollyanna, everything's okay, as the ship is at this angle and going out. What you need from your leader, what you see from the leadership in this organization, what you see from Bud, from Al, from Jim, from Dario, is there is always this thing in the mouth of adversity or in the face of adversity. They're always saying, what is it I can actually do right now that will make a difference? Instead of, oh my God, I nearly said screwed, and you can't say that over here. It's important to be a beacon of positivity. And we talk again about how you go about doing that. Because the day you became a leader, you gave up the option of being a pessimist. The moment you accepted the card that said leader, you accepted a card that said, I will never be a pessimist again. I'll work on it. That's what we talk about in there. Oh man. Isn't it great when you deal with somebody enthusiastic? Isn't it great when you deal with the people in this room? When you see somebody who genuinely is enthusiastic about what they're doing, it's written all over their face. You know they're having a good, you know they love what they're doing. And what the book will tell you is that you don't even realize, but you start mimicking their behavior and their mannerisms and everything because you want to feel like they feel. And it happens, and it works, and it's so extraordinarily contagious. I'm walking into the room and saying, you know, I know the economy is really kind of destroyed at the moment, but we'll be okay, we'll get through. Let's go for it, and let's set a really ambitious goal for 2011. Okay, guys, you know, the enthusiasm was what motivates people. So enthusiasm, extraordinary. Again, we have a program for that. We tell our leaders, or we have told our leaders since the year dot, that they really need to recognize and provide formal recognition to our leaders, or to the people who work for them. We've never told them why it works. They've always taken it on faith. Two quick things that are described in some detail in the book. One, did you know when you give somebody praise and recognition, you cause a chemical reaction in their brain that causes a little squirt of serotonin and dopamine to be injected into their brain. Those are the feel-good chemicals that make you feel good from eating chocolate or from taking exercise and several other activities that I can't mention from the stage, but they are injected and just make you feel good. Now, if somebody says to you, God, Sia, that was a wonderful job, and the reason I say that is, and they praise you, and that injects the chemicals into your brain, you say, that feels pretty good. I think I'll do what I was doing again so I get a little bit more of that. And the second one is, I love it. I almost can't say it because I'm Irish. It's the norm of reciprocity. Okay? That's difficult to say for me. And that is, when you give somebody, when you do somebody a turn, cosmetic counters, ladies, or the Hare Krishna for anybody on the street. Hare Krishna guy comes up and gives you a beautiful book for free. They're broke, but they give you this $12 book, or you go onto the Clinique counter and you get a free sample that clearly has some serious value. The reason that works, the reason they do that and they give that away, and the reason charities send you expensive pens or send you Christmas cards at Christmas is because there's a psychological thing we all share in common called the norm of reciprocity that says, even if I don't like the person who's doing me a good turn, shoot, I have to do it back. So when you give somebody, do them the good turn of giving them feedback and make them feel good and making them feel good about themselves, they are indebted and they want to cooperate with you. That's why recognition works. It's chemical, it's psychological. And the final one is, and it's nicely told, I think, in the book, we talk about Pygmalion and Galatea, but here are the two factors that drive a person's results. And boy, I know, like me, that you have always been subject to the power of another person's belief and their other person's expectations of you. You get it all the time from the profiles people. The single most decisive factor in driving an individual's productivity is the expectation their leader has of them. If they set the expectations high, now not ridiculously high, but they set it at a stretch, they do what Dale Carnegie called in 1932, they give them a good reputation to live up to. Jim Serbasco and Bud Haney, when they hired me, after they had about 4 martinis in me in the Lancaster House in London. That was before we started negotiating the package, by the way. Jim turned to me and he said it many times, he said, "Deiric, you're a really talented guy. You have such extraordinary talent. I'm looking forward to you being in this organization because I know that anything we give you to do, however much a stretch it is, you'll do it. And not only that, you're the sort of guy who brings everything in on time." What are you going to do when somebody gives you that reputation? You're not going to let it slip. The expectations that others have of you are extraordinary. The second driving factor is your expectations of yourself. All of the research is all laid out in the book. A great leader, a charismatic leader, sets the expectations for the people at a level that they achieve more than they thought they could. And when they achieve more, I can do more than I thought. Then their own self-expectations go up, and so they persist a little bit longer and get the results. Not because they're any better, but because they believe they should push to get the results. And it's one of these building on it. There are a couple of other things that we talk about in the book, but here's the point. Once you get to the end of this workshop with your people, you're saying, we have established charismatic leaders drive engagement, engagement drives the bottom line, and any one of us can be more effectively charismatic, more commercially charismatic. All of you have behaviors already that contribute positively to you being an engaging leader. But I bet you don't know what they are. And you know what? If you want to manage yourself to a greater level of charisma, you have to measure where you are right now. In the checkpoint, we have 2 reports. From February 1, you'll have access to them. Al will talk a little bit about the program in a short while. Leadership Charisma or Index tells you on a scale that runs from 1 to 5, 5 being you knock it out of the park all the time. You have all of the behaviors consistently all the time, and you're doing a pretty darn good job at driving a charismatic impact on the people you work with. 1, you really need some work. There are some behaviors in there that need adjustment. The second one appeals to me from an ego perspective. We have the results of 40,000 leaders worldwide. So we compare your leadership charisma index to the average leadership charisma index of people in the world. And we say, here's how charismatic you are on a global scale. So we give you a point. Here is where you are right now. We give you the book so that when you get your leadership charisma report, that you're able to go and do something about it. I don't have to tell you. I'm not going to talk you through the checkpoint. You will in your workshop, and we script it through. So you've got a report which shows them exactly where they are right now. And it's also there with the rest, obviously, of the checkpoint system. So you've just added an extraordinary, is it doing? Yeah. An extraordinary amount of, or we've just added an extraordinary amount of value to the checkpoint system. Now here's the absolute beautiful thing about this workshop, where it all comes together really nicely. You've made the case that leadership charisma is learnable. Leadership charisma drives engagement, engagement drives profits. You have to measure yourself in order to know where you are, and then you can start developing using the book, which we're going to suggest that you give away. And Al's going to tell you how it's going to be actually extremely affordable to do that as an incentive to get people into workshops. Once you get there, you're going to say then, I bet you'd like to, or who here would like to know where they are right now, or would like to know where their management team is in terms of leadership charisma. And at that point, you're going to gift to the people in the room, you're going to gift them a checkpoint. You're going to say to them, I want you to try it, because this stuff is great. I want you to see your leadership charisma index and your leadership charisma quotient, and that's under the same scheme that John Apple and John Baylor and the team have been running with you over the last few months, where you can give away demonstration checkpoints. So Bud has already indicated we hit the ground running at a time when charisma is just about to take off. We now own it. This is ours. Doc is already working on an awful lot more to do with this. This is hot. But it comes down, as Bud said, to we have the right opportunity, we're in the right place and time, now we have to do something about it. Al's going to tell you how the program works and how, if you decide you're going to use the book to drive your business during 2011, how you'll be able to get some workshop training on the leadership charisma reports in the second or third week of January, and how you'll be able to get those reports actually on your system during February. One final word. Is Tim Brennan in the room? Yes, he is. Tim Brennan, last year's Canadian SBP of the Year. This man is the master of getting people in the room for the briefing. And when you've got them in there, making that transition from the briefing to getting them to do something that moves you towards selling them on something. Tim is doing 2 breakouts on Friday and Saturday, and I really strongly recommend you be there. He'll be talking about all of our marketing initiatives, but he's also has been on the inside with this workshop. He'll be talking about how do you get them in the room and how do you close it off. Apologies, Al, I've run over a little bit, but that's as much as I had to say this morning. So thank you very much. Thanks for laughing in the right places too.